The answers to how the universe works are not yet known. And the ultimate truths are ones we're striving for, rather than ones that were written down in a book given to largely illiterate peasants 2,000 years ago. Then I'm all in favor.
Okay, well, it was written down by illiterate peasants. It shows it's miraculous because they were illiterate and they somehow wrote something down. So thanks for the great argument for Christianity. But
the books were, as you well know, the books were written down well after the events, right? We all agree with that, right? Written down by people who could write 100 to 200 years after Christ, for example.
Okay.
200 years. Wow.
Okay, you should read some more.
Let's return to the debate.
This is a debate between theoretical physicist and cosmologist Lawrence Krauss and Christian thinker Michael Jones, not on whether Christianity is true, but whether Christianity or secularism is better for society. I'm not sure when I've seen such an explosive exchange between two academically minded debaters, and we'll see some shocking moments on our way to the big clip. I'll make most of my comments on the back end, but for now, let's jump in as Michael Jones sets it up for us.
The fact remains secularists are not doing the charity work that Christians do. And given the state of the world, a ton of charity work is still needed. So the data indicate Christianity leads to far more charity work inside a nation and beyond its borders. And this in turn has led to more economic progress, medical care, freedom, democracy, literacy, education, etc. When nations secularize, this will decrease, which I think we all can agree is not a good thing. So on this issue, Christian societies clearly outperform secular ones, as even the secular humanist Phil Zuckerman admitted in his book. Religiously involved individuals also exhibit greater manifestations of prosociality than do those who are not religiously involved. Several studies have found that religious people tend to be more charitable, more generous, more likely to volunteer and donate blood than their secular peers are. Furthermore, proliferation of religious devotion, faith in God, and reliance on the Bible has historically been a determining factor in establishing schools for children, creating universities, building hospitals for the sick and homes for the homeless, taking care of orphans and the elderly, resisting oppression, establishing law and order, and developing democracies. Meta-analyses have also found that religiosity is associated with more pro-social behavior and self-control. In an ever-increasing hostile world fueled by social media, more Christianity would be beneficial and aid in ways secularism cannot. Related to this is the issue of suicide and depression. Research that mostly pulls from sample sizes of Christians has demonstrated that religiosity is positively associated with lower levels of depression and suicide. These conclusions are robust considering multiple systematic reviews and meta-analyses have found them. One study from Switzerland relied on census data of over 3.7 million adults and the death certificates of over 5,000 suicides, and found that suicide rates were the highest among those with no religion, more than double the rate of Catholics. Suicide rates have also dramatically increased over the past 20 years in this country, and given the research tying religiosity to lower suicide, it should come as no surprise that this increase has occurred as religiosity has been decreasing. And people like my opponent have indirectly contributed to this, since he's been on a crusade to eradicate Christianity from our modern society. Wow. Religiosity is also positively associated with better mental health, as seen in this meta-analysis, which looked at the data from over 850 studies. If you want a mentally healthy society of people who do not want to kill themselves, we should prefer a Christian society. So the reality is Christianity results in better mental health, lower depression, and lower suicide rates than secularism.
Okay, so we're leading up to that big moment that I really want you to see in this video. For now, Jones has just laid out the evidence from the literature on this, and Christianity is shown to be better for charity, better for depression, better mental health all around, less self-harm, and better pro-social behavior. This seems like Christianity, according to the data, and Jones is the one laying out the data, is just better for society than secularism. Now, to be fair, here's what Krauss argued in his opening statement, at least as best I could tell. You can check that out by looking at the link in the description, but I don't think it came close to overcoming Jones' case. So now let's get a little bit of the interaction between the atheist scientist and the Christian thinker. Lawrence Krauss is here going to argue that people want to be known as Christian, not because they believe, but because they want to be thought of as good people. Here's that.
And he said, why do you call yourself a Christian? They said, the answer that almost universally was given is, we like to think of ourselves as a good person. Most people feel that if they say they're not Christian, they're viewed as people who aren't moral. The reason they call themselves Christian is they like to think of themselves as a good person. The actual dogma or theology of the church is irrelevant.
That's actually kind of an interesting result. It shows that more people realize that Christianity is associated with morality and better results, like giving to charity, pro-sociality. Those people actually seem to know something that you don't, which is that Christianity actually does lead to far morality.
If look, here, tell you what, I give in. If being a good person, believing in rationality, believing that there's no evidence for any higher power is Christian, I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, well, that is not at all what anyone here has argued, and that we're not arguing if Christianity.
If you are allowing people to define Christianity by anything that makes you good, you know, and that has all the underpinnings of a liberal democracy, that has all the underpinnings of all the things I value in life, particularly the willingness to think freely, question everything, and to realize that, in fact, the answers to how the universe works are not yet known, and the ultimate truths are ones we're striving for rather than ones that were written down in a book given to largely illiterate peasants 2,000 years ago, then I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, well, it was written down by illiterate peasants. It shows it's miraculous because they were illiterate and they somehow wrote something down. So thanks for the great argument for Christianity. But
the books were, as you well know, the books were written down well after the events, right? We all agree with that, right? Written down by people who could write 100 to 200 years after Christ, for example.
Okay. 200 years. Wow. Okay, you should read
all
some
right,
more.
Let's return to the debate.
Let's remember the actual debate. The debate, because we're gotten way off topic. The debate is actually what is better for society. We have seen no evidence that today, in the 21st century, secularism is going to produce better results than a Christian society. We just get these vague notions about, secularism is great about free thinking and it's associated with science. What is the actual evidence? Again, I'm a man of science. When I want to find out what's better for society, I read sociology. I go into the actual sociological research. I discussed things with sociologists before I came into this debate to try to say, hey, is this a good study? Is this a robust study? And they came back and said, use this one, not that one. That one's bad. That's what we actually do. If we dive into the science, there is no debate to be had here. The research overwhelmingly shows over and over again Christianity produces better results. Now, maybe in 20 years, if Dr. Krauss goes out as the prophet of secularism and he rallies his seculars together and they start producing children and doing more charity work, we can have a new situation because we'll be updated by new science in the future. Right now, the current science shows us that Christianity is far better. It produces less selfish people, less depressed people, people that are not going to lean into authoritarianism. They're going to go out and make the world a better place. This is what the data shows. At the end of the day, this isn't a debate. It's what the data says.
Well, look, you can claim all you want. What motivates people to do what they want is here's the point ultimately. What are we talking about when we talk about a good society? We're talking about a society that values each person values other people, tries to treat them well, tries to produce the maximum benefits for the maximum number of people. And that and the notions of Christianity in some sense overlap with that and in some sense don't. But the ultimate reason for doing that is rational. I've gone into many places, including speaking to Islamic groups, and asked the following question. If you stopped believing in God, would you go out and murder your neighbor? Okay? Is it the belief in God that causes you to be moral or righteous? Okay? Would you disobey the many aspects of the Ten Commandments? Murder your neighbor. Would you steal? Would you take your neighbor's goods because God didn't tell you to do that? You know, would you do that? And almost every time I do that, people point out no, because the reason that they don't do things, regardless of whether they're Christian or not, is because they have a rational view of how you can live in a society which is functional, where people make a social compact to realize that we ultimately give up some freedoms because we live in a society, we have to share that society with others, and therefore we have to find a way to live harmoniously. And all of that comes from a rational view of the world, and that's not Christian. It's not non-Christian either. It's just based on a sense of empathy and sympathy. And as I say, if you did not believe in God, if you ask people, if you gave up that notion of God, would you behave differently? Most people say no.
James, are we over time or not?
We're near the end of the open dialogue.
Okay.
Any last thoughts as we draw together the threads from the debate overall?
I mean,
before we jump to the conclusions.
I would just reiterate my main points here. One thing I want to go back to is this idea of witch burning in the Middle Ages. Again, I don't have to cite a Christian. I can cite an atheist, Nathan Johnstone. He says between the end of the Roman Empire and the late 12th century, torture had fallen into disuse in Europe. Sam Harris might be surprised to learn that Christendom owed its reintroduction not to bloodthirsty clerics, but to scientific jurists concerned to free justice from the reliance on God's intervention and to champion human judicial competence. In both medieval Europe and modern-day America, then, societies that had abandoned torture contemplated its reintroduction as a rational necessity. But the medieval story, the one for which we know the ending, recounts the failure of rationalism to control its offspring. Christianity did not lead to torture and witch burnings in the late medieval ages. As again, you can cite texts from the early medieval ages, and they say witchcraft doesn't exist. When they started to reintroduce rationalism, that led to more torture and witch burnings, and they couldn't control this horrible offspring. So if you want to claim, everything's secular, you got to claim that as well. Okay, again, you can read that in his book, New Atheism, page 224. So again, I actually want to look at variables. We cannot just say, well, Christians over here, they did something bad, therefore Christianity is the cause. Secularist people did science, therefore secularism is the cause. This is a bivariate means comparison. It's just as bad as when racists like Amy Wax say, look at where all the crime is. It's in black communities. It's not in white communities. Therefore, it must have something to do with black skin. That's absurdly stupid, as I believe my opponent would even agree with me on that.
No,
but you're just looking
Amy
at two
Wax
variables.
is not a racist, but anyway.
I think she is. Okay, but that's just a very bad argument. We got to look at different variables. This is why we need to do science, sociological research, just multivariable analyses and robustness checks, running things through different models like OLS models to determine if these variables are associated with these outcomes. This is why in my opening statement I relied so much on science, because I thought my opponent was a man of science and he'd be interested in that kind of stuff. Not do this armchair kind of science where we just look at these things vaguely and go, well, look at these weird associations. No, I want to know what the multivariable analyses show. And they always show, at least 90% of the time, that Christianity is leading to positive results.
Okay, now I can't help but say, but now not only does the atheist scientist make two big blunders when it comes to the writing of the Bible, but now he's rolled out in response to this literature anecdotal arguments and the age-old response from atheists that, well, you'd probably still be good even if there was no God, that I've heard from Dan Barker, Matt Dillahunty, and other non-scientists. Michael Jones laid out the facts, and the atheist scientist whose job it was to shoot it down just couldn't. Okay, so I see two takeaways here. First, this debate wasn't about whether Christianity is true, but if Christianity is true, it makes sense. We would expect that it's going to be good for the culture. And two, the next time some secular person in the culture tries to paint Christianity or religion in general as the problem, you can remember that there was an atheist scientist who took that question on and couldn't get his case off the ground. But don't take my word for it. Go check out the description and watch the full debate for yourself.